Welcome to the best hour of their day podcast with your hosts, Jason Fernandez.
And me, Jason Ackerman. With more than 20 years in the business,
As both coaches and affiliate owners,
our passion is to help create world-class affiliates
and coaches by building
better
boxes.
boxes. Welcome to
The best hour of your day. We are back, best hour of their day, in real life, IRL, at Takeover Athletics, home of CrossFit Takeover. Kristin Bowen, more affectionately known as K-Bo in the seminar staff world. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
The viewers want to know, what is it like to give me feedback on a regular basis?
We're just jumping right into it. I have some feedback for that intro, if you'd like.
Yeah,
No.
please do. No, no. So we were going to talk about giving feedback in the affiliate coaches, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to chat with you because I'm sure this is accurate, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure I've worked more with you than anybody on seminar staff, and it's probably not even close.
Probably. Yeah, I imagine so.
How long you've been on? Because you've been on longer than I have, but I don't know about how much. Not by a ton. You're 10 years?
It will be 10 years in April. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you're like
it's probably a few months.
Yeah. So I'm 10
you.
years
Yeah.
in the fall,
In
like
the fall,
August or
yeah.
September or something like that. Okay. And then you've been a flow master for
A little over. It'll be almost 6 years. So a little over, like 5.5 years.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea how many seminars you've worked?
I do. Ooh. I'm either at 300 or I'm about to hit 300. I'm like somewhere around though.
That's a big number.
Yeah. So I don't know
Is
the
that a
exact.
green patch?
Is it a green patch?
I don't know. Remember when they gave us the little?
Oh yeah.
Little Velcro? I know that.
Just for a new patch.
Oh, I only have the 100 because that's the last time we had a summit.
Yeah.
That's like a light blue.
Yeah.
No. The green. No, the 200 is green. I don't know what color
that
is it.
teal.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what the 300 was.
I don't know.
There was only a handful
that
they
point,
gave out.
They probably only gave out like 4 of them.
Yeah.
But there's quite a lot of people now that have gotten over the 300 mark.
Oh,
but,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm right
I don't know how
around.
many-
I'm right around there. It's crazy to think about.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. So, and which kind of validates why I want to have this conversation, because you've 300 seminars over 10 years, all over and you've done a lot of traveling for seminars.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There was
how many
a stretch
countries
of
you've been
time.
to?
15 maybe.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe I would have to count, but I've been all over Europe, Ukraine.
You had like a South America stretch
I've
for
been
a
to
while.
South America, Brazil a few times, Saudi Arabia, Israel.
What was that like? The Saudi Arabia.
It
one?
was unique. It was interesting.
Was that an all-female?
It was all female. That was, for me, I know there's some female staff that's been multiple times. That was a check the box for me. Like,
Oh, really?
did it?
Oh, meaning you're like, I'm all set.
It was really cool, don't get me wrong. The experience was awesome, meeting all the girls there to take the course, that they were just so passionate about CrossFit, but getting there, the stress of being there, it was hard. And the other thing,
it's a stark cultural shift.
Yes, we had to wear a abaya the whole time, so cover from neck all the way down to your ankles, and could only take it off when we got behind closed doors.
Okay, so not in the seminar setting.
Correct. We had to wear it to the gym, and then once we got into the gym, the doors closed. There were no males in the gym.
Right.
Then myself, the other trainers, and then all the participants, normal gym clothes, everything normal. Yeah.
That's very odd. Well, it's not odd.
It's
just
just,
like
culturally.
it's not. It's odd to me.
Right.
It's very normal there.
But and to be fair, that was very shortly after I had become a flow master, so I still didn't really have my feet on the ground yet. So there was a lot
I know
of
how that feels.
Yeah, exactly. So now imagine instead of Dunkirk, Maryland, you're in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Well, that's what I'm going to feel in 2 weeks when I go to Puerto Rico to do a translated gig. And I'm like, I have no idea what anybody's saying here. I hope it's somewhat on time.
But, little stressful, but definitely something where I'm thankful for the experience.
My check the box was Kuwait.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was still I think I was still active duty at the time, and they're like, "You're going to go to Kuwait," and I was like, "I don't want to."
Yeah, too bad.
And I was with Jenny. She's like, "I can't wait," and I'm like, "Of course you can't wait." I was like, I don't want to go back to work.
And sleep in the barracks.
I'm leaving to work to go back to work. I mean, it was an open bay barracks, and I was with her and Nolan. And Nolan was like stoked about it because Yeah, I think it was like his old unit or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't really want to go to Kuwait.
Yeah.
And then it was like that weird return where I was like, they put me in a hotel so that I could leave the hotel at like midnight. So like Sunday night.
Yes.
I was like, I had to be at the airport at some weird hour. But yeah, I was like, no thanks, guys. I'm good on the Kuwait trips for a while. What's your favorite one?
Oh my gosh.
Outside of the continental United States.
Oh, outside of the continental? Cape Town, South Africa.
I could see that. Mm-hmm. Is that
It was pretty amazing.
That's about, those are kind of like the same distance almost, I guess, like travel-wise.
It was pretty far.
Yeah.
We flew to Atlanta, and then it was like, if I remember, maybe a 13-hour flight from Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay.
But it was cool. I mean, Jobst was there, and he hosted us. And
is he still there?
He's not. He's in South America now. Yeah.
Where?
I'm not quite sure. Brazil.
Okay. Small country.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
a few
not quite
people.
sure exactly.
Just a few people.
I think he's somewhere in Brazil, I believe, like Florianopolis or something.
And newly minted.
Newly minted.
You. Level 4.
Level 4. Newly minted. Yes.
Newly minted.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I will be proud about that one.
Yeah, you should. I need to make some phone calls.
Yes.
That needs to happen.
Yes.
We won't talk about the specifics, obviously.
I can't.
I know. It's a rule.
Yes.
You sign a non-disclosure agreement when you sign up for the course.
Agreement.
We talked to Katie Hayes about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
also newly minted.
Also newly minted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you still coach pretty regularly.
Yes.
How many? Like how many a week? 2, 3?
2 on average.
Enough.
Mm-hmm. 2. But for the past 13 years, I've been coaching group classes.
Yeah, you have a large block of classes underneath your belt.
Yeah.
Was it still nerve-wracking?
Oh, yes. I was so nervous. Yes. Yeah.
Scale of 1 to 10. That versus like your first level 2 being evaluated.
As a participant?
No. Oh yeah. Actually, you could go either one. As a participant or as a red shirt when you do the day 2 workout and the Flow Master evaluates your class.
Yeah. So as a participant, I took the level 2 when it was still called the coach's prep course. I didn't really know a lot then, so I wasn't nervous. I just kind of was like, okay, let me learn. As a red shirt doing a class at a level 2, yes, I was nervous, but it did not compare at all to how nervous. You know how the more you know, the more you realize you don't know? Right. It's kind of like you go into things, you're just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and it's like, I'm going to run my first workout at the level 2. I'm going to prepare, but, you know, it's going to go great, whatever. Now, at this point, knowing, they give you a pretty comprehensive guidelines for what they're going to be evaluating you on. Reading through all that, knowing how stringent the raters are, how the unknown factors that I have no idea what the workouts are until 48 hours in advance. I'm not at my home gym. I don't know who the people are going to be. You have to essentially prepare for every possible scenario so that you're not just spinning your head when the time is there, and you can concentrate on essentially it's your opportunity to coach the very best 2 classes that you have the ability to coach.
Yeah. How did you feel when you were done?
Not good. But I think that's the nature of everything, right? It's like,
I don't know. Sometimes you finish a class, you're like, crushed it.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. But I think, how you can do really, really well and get all this feedback that's super positive, and then you get that one thing, and then you just marinate over that one thing, And so I think that there was a little bit of that, and I think that's part of the process. Like, if you're not hard on yourself.
Oh, yeah, you're
probably
that's la la land.
Yeah, if I come out of it and I'm like, I crushed that, more than likely I didn't crush it. But if I come out of it and I'm like, oh man, this part didn't go the way I planned and that part didn't go, what that says to me is I had a pretty darn solid plan going into it. And even though it didn't go exactly how I wanted, because my plan was so solid, I think that it clearly went better than I thought. Yeah.
You passed. You are, in fact, level 4. Do you remember what you were immediately post-class? You're like, man, I missed the mark on that. Because we can't talk about the workouts either, because there's like a batch in there. And you don't have to speak specifics, but it's just like I wanted to do something in the specific warm-up that I didn't get to.
Yeah, okay. So I think just like with most classes that we run, we have our plan on paper, and then it starts being executed in real life, in real time, and you're just looking at your watch. You're like, oh, crap. I was going to have them do that, but, like, I'm not going to have time to do that. So then, like, on the fly, you know, or we're not going to do that. Or, you know, I had a plan to layer in this piece, but I don't think that's going to work for what I have in front of me. So I have to make the call to leave that. And you just hope it's the right call, right?
I have this fear that when I take it, I'm going to revert back to the new trainer with zero presence and attitude, because I'm so worried about that.
Right. Which might
somebody
happen.
Comes up and they're like, you should
but,
smile, it'll
right.
help.
And I imagine, and that's part of it, right? Like presence and attitude is one of our criteria. That is important. And so if you have everything, you have your plan, you've studied, everything technical is there, but you're so nervous that you can't lean on that preparation and then turn on that button.
Like, not autopilot, but like I've done this 10,000 times.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to lean on my preparation, and I hate to say fake it till you make it, because you're not faking it, right? We don't want people to fake it, but there is an element of I have to still show that I can do all these things and be comfortable doing it, and not let, I say participants, not let the people in the class feel that I'm nervous. Not let them, they should just feel like just a.
Was it like? Was it? It's got. Was it intern level nervousness?
I was more nervous
for the level 4.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. Lot. Yeah, I was nervous.
Now I'm nervous.
Yeah, but I think you should be nervous.
I know.
I do. I think if you're going into it,
I fucked up in the internship.
I know.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows. But look, you're still here.
I made it.
You know how to do a kipping pull-up.
I do.
Everything is fine.
You should tell that story, because it's just funny.
Okay.
I was super new.
Yeah.
I mean, probably for sure less than 10 seminars.
Oh, I think it was less than that, because I think you were just demoing. Like you weren't even giving the pull-up station.
And I think I was probably a little butthurt, because maybe like within 1 or 2 seminars, either front or back. I think it was before that. Might have been my first seminar. Cherie Chan.
I was just gonna say this was probably my first time giving feedback to you.
Oh, okay, this is perfect. I had the one before. Cherie Chan literally pulled me off of the GHD demo.
Oh.
I watched it, and she was just like, no.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? She was like, that's unacceptable. And I was like, devastated.
Yeah. There's a big level. I mean, not to like kind of go off course here. I'll tell the story.
Yep.
But don't you think when you get on staff, there's such a big level of you have to be like a certain level of a trainer to get on staff. You have to have a certain amount of knowledge, right?
Yes.
And so then you start, and now you're a beginner again.
Oh, it's
and it's a hard transition sometimes for a lot of people.
You're
to
me. This guy.
Yeah.
You're the worst. You're the worst person in the group. Like you are, and it is painfully obvious
Humbling,
to you
right?
and the group that you are the weak link. Nobody says it. Nobody treats you that way, but like it's understood to be like, you're the moron in the group.
Yeah.
And then that, so like, I forget, it was like, we were in a gym in Charlotte somewhere.
We were in Charlotte.
And
I was running the pull-up.
They had like yellow colors in their affiliate. This is like 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, I remember it really very clearly.
Not Max, it was like Max something. I don't know.
I don't even think we go there anymore.
No, we don't.
I can't remember the last time. That was probably the last time I was there.
I think maybe like Donnie was gonna give it, and I was like demoing.
No, I was giving it.
Oh, you were giving it.
Are we talking about the pull-up?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what was happening. Like there's a lecture going on in another room. So you and I came to the space where we're gonna do the pull-up breakout. And we're going over the progression for the pull-up.
That's right.
Okay, first we're going to kip swing, show me that.
Right.
Then we're going to do this. And that was when we used to do the bridge on the floor. Remember the hip bridge to get the hip open?
Right.
And so then once you do the hip bridge, you get onto the pull-up, and you have to show the translation from that floor drill onto the pull-up bar, getting the hip open. Well, this guy... just doing the old strongman pull up where he does the pull up but keeps the hip closed, feet are up, whatever. And I kept telling you,
like nope.
You need to kick your feet to the ground. You need to get your hip open, whatever we were talking about. And you just couldn't correct it. And you're getting so frustrated. But like we had to get it right because we were about to demonstrate this is the part of the drill that we want the participants to do. So you have to be able to demonstrate it in that way. And you drop down and you look at me and you go, I know how to do a kipping pull-up.
And I remember your face vividly, and you're like,
noted.
I don't think you do.
Like, do ya? Not the way you need to do it today, sir.
You might be doing a version of a kipping pull-up, but this is not.
Oh man, it was so funny. I was like, okay, calm down.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how you're not doing it the way in which we need you to do it.
Oh, you're doing something, but it is in fact incorrect.
That's concluded our very first feedback session with each other.
Oh man,
it didn't go well.
I corrected.
Yeah.
I think I did.
Yeah.
But
no, you did. Once you
so
understood what we were talking about.
That's a running joke between Kristin and I. Like something like somebody's like asking a stupid question. I'm like, I know how to do a kipping pull-up.
I know how to do a kipping pull-up.
But that's so you've given a ton of feedback over the years. So as a coach to athletes inside of the affiliate, to other trainers in red shirts, as a flow master to other trainers, and then you're currently one of your roles is part of the after action review kind of team that sees all of the feedback from seminars that comes through for all seminars, right? Like every weekend.
Yes. So the seminar ends, the flow master will write an after action report. That report then has to be reviewed. So essentially feedback on your report.
Yeah.
And it's just a way for us to, track trends and find out, if there
Quality
were any
assurance.
challenges or what positive, great things are the trainers doing and things like that. So
and so that was why I wanted to kind of chat about this, because I think you're really good at it, and it's one of the, and you and I have talked about this. It becomes really hard to give tangible, candid feedback to people that you're around a lot.
100%. Mm-hmm.
And Cassidy and I have both talked about this. Like, I've always thought that you're one of the best people, because like I was trying to think, I don't think we have ever worked together when you've not given me something tangible. And like I said, we've worked probably north of 100 seminars together, but and some of it is hurtful.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just to make you better.
But I've never left there with like, that was not useful to me.
Okay.
And that's not always the case.
Great. I mean, that's great feedback for me. Because, that's the goal,
but that's not
right?
always the case, right? Sometimes
right.
I'm like, I'm not really sure that's super useful or helpful, but like, and obviously the nature of the feedback, or the flavor of the feedback shifts over time. It starts where it's kind of technical.
Yes.
And then you shift and you get pretty good. And then it becomes like soft skill feedback. That's typically the ones that hurt more.
Yeah. I know. It's so much easier to get the feedback of, hey, you didn't say this. Make sure you say that. Got it. But when you get feedback, you're right, a little more intangible. It's a little bit more about like, can be construed as this is about my personality.
And it's your face. But that's one of the things that like we talk to affiliate owners all the time. Like, I've got a coach that bad attitude or, talks to people in a weird tone, or is super short with certain things, or argumentative, or like an insert whatever that has nothing to do with like the thruster or the snatch.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's a soft skill personality thing. And that can be really hard. And then the other thing, I think this is an interesting conversation with you, is because I maybe found this like out a year ago. You were, I don't know how it came up. We were doing feedback after a seminar, and you're like, oh, I hate giving feedback.
Oh my God, I hate it so much.
And I was like, wait, what? And you were like, oh yeah, it's the thing I dread the most.
It
I was
is so
like,
hard for me. It is.
Which is crazy because you're really good at it. But because a lot of people have that feeling. So obviously you probably didn't start there.
No.
But how does that work? Like when did you start trying to, I don't say get good at it, but start to kind of like figure out like, this is how I'm going to approach giving feedback?
I think, shout out to my girl, Brene Brown.
Okay.
Yeah. She, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. I remember reading that years ago and being like, oh my God. And she gives this analogy of if you have to get from point A to point B, like whatever, I'm going to butcher the analogy, so I'll just keep it simple.
Right.
You've got to get to point B. And if you zigzag around and you avoid and you have these other side conversations and you try to save people's feelings, you still have to get to point B. So if you just go directly there, it's maybe a little harder, but really in the long run, it saves everybody the trouble. It clears up any confusion. The other thing that I read that was helpful for me is, and this is the whole clear is kind, unclear is unkind, is that when you're unclear to someone, you think you're doing it because you want to save their feelings and you want to like do a soft delivery and you don't want to make them upset. But really, it's because you're uncomfortable giving harder feedback. It's not for the usually the person can take it, right? If you are you agreeing with me or disagreeing with me?
But this is another one. It hurts. You're like, oh, it's me.
Yeah.
It's me. It's not them.
Right.
I'm not actually saving them. I'm avoiding.
Exactly. Yeah. And if I'm just kind of like tiptoeing around it and not giving them exactly what I'm thinking and what I think they really need to hear, then there can be miscommunication. They may not really truly understand what I'm trying to say. And so then that doesn't set them up for success to make any of the changes that they most likely want to make, especially, in our job, people are like so hungry for feedback to just get better, which that alone makes it easier, right? When people want to hear it. But
well, I also think there's a misconception, and I do, like in any call it organization, right? Whether it's the box or whatever, I think there's like a sticking point when you go from this culture where that type of feedback is avoided to be like, nope, we're going to do it. And then there's a lot of like friction and there's a lot of hurt feelings or resistance to I think Ray Dalio in Principles calls it radical transparency. Oh, okay. Which is just like, there's no room for fluff here.
Right.
Like there's no room for feelings because the only thing that matters is the outcome. We have to improve the outcome, which means everybody has to show up knowing that you're going to get feedback that is probably not going to make you look great.
Right.
But that's not the point. The point is to make you look great. The point is to make you better.
Better, yeah.
At which point you will look great. And some of that has to be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes. And I think there's certainly a disconnect there for a lot of people, right? Like, oh, if you get this hard feedback, it's only to make you better.
Right.
Generally,
it's like cool thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Still
I think
hurts.
the level 2s would be a great example. Like the participants come in and our whole role that weekend is to figure out what they're weak at and figure out what their strengths are, but also figure out like, okay, you're really great in these things, but you're lacking a little bit over here. So if we can only make those a little bit better, think how much better you're going to be overall.
Right.
Many times we get participants that aren't used to getting feedback. That's not the world in which they live. And so then we try to give them things and they shut down, because it's like they're not seeing that we're not giving them feedback to make them look silly or to call them out on anything, but it's to just make them better over the long run. And if there's not that connection there, that can certainly be a little bit more challenging. I do think, just to go back to your question about how I kind of started incorporating giving like harder feedback when it's something that I don't love.
Well, for the record, I'm not sure anybody really loves it.
Yeah, I agree.
Like nobody likes there's probably some weird person who's like, I love uncomfortable scenarios, but I'm like, at the end of the day, like, I think that's kind of bullshit. Like, I don't know anybody's just like, man, I can't wait to have this uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
Like, no, but you do it. You get better at it, and you get better at tolerating
it.
Right?
It's the reps. You start to realize that and there's a disconnect a little bit. There was for me, and there still is a little bit, right? Like, there's this disconnect between like intellectually and emotionally. Like intellectually, I know that these are the things I need to say. I know that this is this is the best way to do it. Clear is kind, all this stuff. Emotionally, I still am like, but I don't want to make them feel awkward. I don't want to, and that's why I think it's hard when I say giving feedback is hard for me because my nature, like to call myself, I'm a recovering codependent people pleaser. So my nature, which you could probably see, right?
You are.
Is like people pleasing,
Right.
and I've done a lot of work on myself to get better at this role. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do all these reps of giving hard feedback, and eventually it's not going to be. I mean, you asked how long I've been Flowmaster, almost 6 years, and it's still hard for me to have hard conversations, especially with the people we were talking about where it's more intangible. It's more about
Right.
soft skills. It's like, hey, on paper, everything you did was fantastic, but here are some things that could make you better.
I'll give you guys an example.
Yeah.
So I think you and probably Nicole Gordon. She's another one who's
Mama Gordon.
Mama
Yeah.
Gordon. She's a little bit rough around the edges on the feedback,
Yeah.
but it was good, you know. But you had given me feedback, and you're like, "Hey, you look really lax when you do certain things."
Yeah.
And to your credit, you were like, "I know you're not doing it on purpose, but it's perceived as you're just lax."
Perception is reality.
Perception is reality.
right?
And so I believe the scenario was just like, "Hey, it was very simple. You're like, don't lean on the pull-up rig, or like put your hands in your pockets."
Yeah.
And I was just like, "But I like to lean on the pull-up rig. Like it's my whoopee, it's my blanket."
Yeah, and
you're
my
like,
fingers are cold. Like, I don't care
Yeah.
that your fingers are
cool,
cold.
take them
You
out of your
look
pocket.
lazy.
Yeah. And right, so that's it, right? But it's stuff like that where it was like you probably knew that was not going to be the easiest conversation, but you're like, you probably also knew that like he'll understand where I'm coming from and the level of expectation. But you also did a good job of explaining like it wasn't about like you're lazy.
Right.
It's about like it looks to the participants like you're lazy, at which point it impacts their experience inside of this seminar setting where we're here to bring the heat.
Even if they can't put their finger on it, it's little things like that throughout the weekend that contribute to just the overall feel of everything. Yeah, and those things are important.
So like inside of do you have a framework for when you give feedback? Do you have like I try
Like
to lead
the compliment sandwich.
Yeah, something along those lines. Maybe it's not the compliment sandwich, but do you have like something like a framework that you use when you give feedback?
Probably a little bit like the compliment sandwich. Like I
Right.
try to lead. There's a lot of research on the different ways to give it. You know, that one book, I don't know if you read it, but the verbal judo book that we read.
It's in my queue. I have it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I think the way that he says it is if you start with the good, they're not going to really hear the negative because they're
stuck on the
not
good.
going to. Oh, geez, I'm butchering this.
One or the other.
One or
I
the
get it.
other. It's like, hey, if you start with the good, then it's going to impact how they, take away X, Y, Z. Or if you start with the bad, then they're not going to hear the good, and you're just beating them down. So, quite honestly, I don't have really a template. It's a little bit based on the person.
I get that.
And their level, what's their level? Is it someone I've built a really strong rapport with over the years, like you, that I've worked with many, many times? Or is it someone that, like, I don't really know that well? They're a level 2 participant, or
Right.
it's a newer
They're like,
trainer.
I'm going to make this person cry. If I do
Right,
that.
right. And that's another thing, too. Like, speaking of that, like, I can feel and read emotion fairly well, and so I
would
can
agree.
feel if someone's starting to shut down. Then I have to kind of maneuver my tactics, like mid session.
That was one. That's probably one of the things that I became like very conscious of and like tried to hone that skill like early on, because the volume of feedback either in the level 1 or in the level 2 is high, and you start to really hone in on like, oh, this person's not digging this at all.
Yeah.
And when I was early on, I would just back off and I would move on and I would leave them, whether it was an athlete in a position that needed to be corrected or a coach who was doing a thing that needed to be corrected. I would just be like, all right, I'm going to move on.
Oh, like if they were shutting down because you're giving them too much?
Yep.
It's like,
I would
like
just
abandon ship.
I would literally just give up.
Yeah.
And that was my only tactic at that
Right.
point. I was like, well, I don't want to embarrass them in front of the group. I'm not going to do that.
So we're going to do nothing.
We're going to do nothing.
Yeah.
And then that rapidly became not acceptable because you're like, well, I'm not helping them.
Right.
I have to figure out like how to do that. So then you figure out like how to avoid getting to that point with regard to the feedback. You're like, oh, I'm just trying to avoid that line altogether.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to recover from that. Like if you walk somebody right up to the line where they're getting ready to shut down, it's hard to recover.
Right.
Really hard.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, if I even think I'm getting close to that, I just switch tactics immediately. I'm not even going to chance it in some of those scenarios because I don't want the feedback to not make it to them.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
And it used to be like head on, which is like, oh no, you're getting the feedback.
Right.
I don't care how you feel about it. And I was like, that was I was like, that's about me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's not helping them at all.
Right.
It just makes me look what I thought was cool. Makes me look like a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's the ultimate goal of the feedback? What's the ultimate goal? To get them better.
Right.
For them to absorb what you're telling them, and they can they hear you and they take it seriously and to heart, and they make some changes. Maybe they don't agree with it, and maybe it's one of those things. That's another thing, right? Like, hey, here's something stylistically that maybe you should try out. Mm-hmm. Hey, here's something you definitely should be doing.
So
differentiating between those.
Can you elaborate on that? Because like you and I understand the difference between, so they're stylistic, and then this is black and white. Because those are the terms that we use. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people miss the opportunity to delineate between the two, because it is a bit of a buffer when you're giving feedback. It's just like, hey, I'm going to switch gears now on how this piece of feedback can and should be received.
Okay.
So can you delineate for people, like a coach who's like trying to give feedback but struggles, they're a boxer or whatever, like the different types and how you approach them?
Right. So directive feedback are the non-negotiables, right? Like, you're a gym owner, and here are the non-negotiables. You have to give a whiteboard brief. You need to create a lesson plan. You need to incorporate a cool down. The class needs to end on time. I want you using a progression when you teach the movements. Mm. Stylistic is more stylistic. It's like, hey, you're staying within the parameters of the directives that I've given you, and how you choose to implement that is up to you. Yeah. Because not everybody is going to have the same style. We know that, right? Yeah. Like, some coaches come in and they're, jovial and joking, and their classes are really fun. Other coaches are a little more subdued. That doesn't mean either one of them is more effective than the other. But if we try to tell the guy that's more subdued, you need to make more jokes, and that's not him, right? But maybe stylistically, you could give him some suggestions for how he could lighten the mood a little bit in his class, right?
Yeah, I think that was always a struggle too. Like, how do you? It's like objective versus subjective, or like when Todd Whitman, I think in the last, he was just like, hey, you're giving your opinion. Nobody cares. I was like, oh, duly noted. And that's what I think about it. I'm like, is this my opinion on how this should be done? Or is this how this is supposed to be done? And if it's in the, like, oh, that's a debatable topic, it goes in the stylistic bucket. Mm-hmm. And then it just becomes more of a suggestion, be like, hey, this is what happened. Here's potentially another way or another tool to use that, is kind of like the way I've found to kind of like deliver it, which is like, it's not wrong, right? Arguably suboptimal. If you wanted to improve that, here's another option. Yeah. You can use that. I still want to improve, but you could try it this way, versus like you started at 4:01 and we start class at 4.
Yes.
Right. That's directive.
And I think, to your point, your delivery is in how you're saying that. Here's another way. You don't have to do it this way. That is very important for the people receiving the feedback to know without a shadow of a doubt what is directive, what is stylistic.
Right.
What is your opinion? You're using your experience to offer them some suggestions for how maybe they could improve this one thing, this second thing, this third thing. Or, this is a non-negotiable. It has to be done this way.
I struggled with that early on, giving feedback, even the affiliate too, like separating those two. So it was just meaning like there was just a laundry list of things. Mm-hmm. And there was no clarity on what was what.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a laundry list of things that I saw that were wrong, half of which were my opinion, half of which might have been directive in nature.
Then you're leaving it up to the receiver to make that choice. And then they're going to, you know what I mean?
Well, it's just, it's confusing for them.
So confusing.
And it also becomes harder to provide, like, what's the solution?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, they're just like, oh, well, thanks, but no. That's not helpful.
And that's another thing. I mean, actionable, right? Like making your feedback actionable. If you just tell someone, hey, I want this to be done, and you don't tell them how to do it, it's like, open your hips. It's like, great, got it. Like, how do I do that? Squeeze your butt, jump higher, lock your knees out, whatever the case may be. And that's feedback, right? Like, that's feedback. Telling your athletes how to move better is feedback. Mm-hmm. If you're giving these bigger picture feedbacks for how to run the class, or how to coach, or lectures, or whatever the case may be, and you're giving them something, but you're not telling them how to do it, you're leaving something out on the table. You're not doing your due diligence in helping them get to that next level.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes the directive, it's like, you need to do this, and then the how to do it becomes subjective, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The directive is be on time. How you choose to be on time is up to you.
Yeah, here are some suggestions.
But be on time.
Leave your house earlier than you think you need to.
Plan accordingly.
Yeah.
Put it in your calendar. Have you seen, so AAR specifically, because that's I view kind of like the AARs that you look at similar to like the box owner giving feedback to the coach. Mm-hmm. Meaning there's a difference between, okay, I'm a coach, I'm giving feedback to the athlete. That's one
within the class. Yeah.
There's kind of like peer to peer, and then there's like kind of like boss employee type deal.
Yep.
Are there like common trends that you see where for like newer people who start in those roles or whatever, that would be helpful for people to like either try to avoid or like try? Because I'm always curious about that, like reading through the feedback. I'm like, you have to see trends. I'm curious what they are.
So I'm not quite sure I understand your question. For a boss, like a gym owner giving feedback to one of their coaches?
Yeah. So like, do you, like, for instance, like, and I'm not saying like what does the AR say, but like there's obviously trends there. And I that relationship of like flow master to redshirt is akin to box owner and head coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so I would imagine that the feedback or the trends that you would see there would also be trends that you would see in the box.
Yeah. There's some similarities, right? Where, experience level really comes into play. Like, you're going to see some of the flow masters that have been doing this for 10, 11, 12 years. The feedback that they're able to pull out and the things they're able to pinpoint and the themes that they're able to see are so much deeper than maybe the flow masters that come in and they've only been doing it for a year or two. You know, it's like focusing on just more kind of pointed, like more tangible items, right? Not as deep in with themes, if I'm making sense there.
I think so.
Yeah. So let me kind of go a little bit further there. If you're watching an athlete, just to give a little comparison, not an athlete, if you're watching a coach, coach a class, you're going to give them some feedback on their class, right? And they're a pretty new coach. You know, they've been coaching a couple years maybe. Your feedback for that coach is probably going to be drastically different than if I'm watching you coach a class or I'm watching Andy, the owner here.
Right.
You know, they've owned this gym for 13 plus years.
Yeah.
When I watch him coach a class, if he wants me to give him feedback, it's on him. I'm peeling layers back, right? Because he's mastered the basics at that point. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, the more experience you have, the more those basics are mastered. So we don't even have to, you know, that's housekeeping, right? Like making sure, like, okay, are you still there? Are you, Fern, are you still using your progression when you know, did you see those people with their knees touching each other while they squatted and you made a correction? Great. That's all at this point in your journey. That's all to be expected. Same thing, regardless of what it is. And so then it's like, all right, now we've got to, again, like peel the layers back. And how can we continue to make that person better? It's meeting people at their level. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering your question.
You are. It's like there you have to, but I'm trying to think of like organizationally, like for a new coach. Like I look at that and I'm like, what helps me is obviously we don't need to reinvent the wheel. 6 criteria.
Yeah.
And for newer coaches, it might be for newer coaches, it's probably going to be heavy. Let's call it, if we say teach, see, correct, group management, presence and attitude, demonstration on one column. For the newer coaches, it's probably going to be heavy on the teach, see, correct, deficiency.
Yes.
They're not to say there's not going to be deficiencies on the other side, but those are going to be really glaring. Mm-hmm. Where a more seasoned coach who's like, they've got these things kind of down, now we kind of move over to be like, hey, logistically, you could do yourself some favors if you maybe looked at it this way, or presence and attitude. Like, consider this. Like, you're like an example would be a coach who's pretty seasoned, and they have you're in the 5 p.m. class, and all these people are like, you know, OGs.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're kind of mailing in the specific warm up here because they all kind of know what they're doing. And the feedback, I mean, I'm just like, what I would do is like, obviously it's a different group. I'm not saying that you have to take them through a extremely long progression with a PVC pipe, but you need to coach them.
Right.
Like, give them a barbell instead. Teach them how to cycle the barbell, like switch the tactic, but like the basics still hold. You have to teach them.
You have to teach
You
them.
have to teach them, and you have to correct them, and you have to and do it that way. So I think that's where it gets a little bit lost because, you know, like I'm thinking of box owners that we work with. They're like, well, I can think of two specifically where they purchased the gym and now they have coaches that have far more experience than them.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, how do I give
hard.
them? Yeah, it's super hard.
That's really hard.
How do I give them feedback? I'm like,
Yeah.
probably start with directive because it's just easy. Something that's like not arguable. Like there's no
Right.
debate going to happen after. You'll be like, hey, I saw that we started like a couple minutes late. We start on time because people have places to be and do all that. And just start there because it's not something we're going to have a conversation about.
Right, exactly. And the things that are directive like that, too, allows you to start to then build a little bit of rapport, right? Like you get a little street cred because it's like, here's how we're going to run it. Here's how it needs to go. If you jump right into it and it's like, now I'm giving feedback to someone who has more experience than I do, and you're giving them all these like subjective kind of suggestions,
like, thanks.
even if they're valid, many times that will be met with like a closed door. It's like, you don't know as much as I do. You're new here. But if again, that's why it's never a bad idea to kind of go back to the basics and look at like, are they running their class on time? Are they doing, just all those very clear on paper measures, like cover those first. And then once you have that, because that's hard to go. I think regardless of the scenario, many people have been in that scenario many times where you're now put into a situation where you have to give feedback to someone that has either been doing it longer than you.
I had to give you feedback.
Yeah. You did.
Like, as the flow,
it went in one ear, one out.
Yeah.
No,
You're just like, I didn't pay attention.
Like you did? Yeah.
But I had to give you feedback,
and that's
I was
hard,
like,
right?
it's really
Like,
hard.
yeah.
I'm like, man, I gotta get dialed in here. Like I can't. And I looked at this. I can't mail it in, and I was like, and just professionally, I was like, I owe her that because she's given me the common courtesy of doing that for me. So it can't just be like, well, you didn't do this, or like you, and it's like, no, it needs to be like some meaningful feedback that's like actually gonna push this forward. And I think that's where you can get stuck, but like you just have to like try your best.
Yeah.
Like and here's where I think that's valuable is that here's what I think is really cool about the CrossFit community. I think everybody, regardless if they've been there for one day or they've been there for one decade, everybody understands and recognizes effort. And you might not be doing a good job.
Right. But it's
very obvious.
And you care.
Right. It's very obvious that this person is trying.
Yes.
And it's like, people will cut you a break.
Yeah.
And that's the way.
That's something Todd Widman put out to us last year during a Flowmaster meeting. Assume positive intent. And I've heard it from other places as well, but it's like, man, if that's not something to just hold on to, right? When it's assume positive intent. Like maybe they're not doing it the way that is the best way or whatever the case may be, but generally in this community, people do. They didn't
walk out there like, I'm going to try to suck today.
Yeah, I'm going to run the worst class I've ever run. It's going to be funny. Everyone's going to, it's like, no, people generally, I should say, are doing the best they can for what they have in front of them at that moment. And that's going to change from time to time, right? It's the whole idea. It's like, assume positive intent. Somebody cuts you off on the highway. Instead of getting all mad, it's like, well, maybe something's going on and they're on their way to the hospital. Right. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think when you start thinking about it that way, it really does help you kind of approach hard feedback with more of a blank slate so that you're not emotional and you're not, and I did want to speak to what you were just saying about giving me feedback, right? It has to be meaningful, it has to mean something. And I think if we're talking about the gym owners who are trying to create that rapport and if you ask yourself, is this feedback, does it have purpose? Is it going to make them better? Or am I just giving feedback for the sake of giving feedback? Because people can see through that, right? Like if I'm just trying, and I'm talking about now we're peeling apart the layers, right? Like you've got everything, your lectures are dialed in, you're hitting all the points, like the timeline is there, whatever the case may be, whatever I'm giving you feedback on. And I'm like, God, I got to find something for them. And then I give you something random and dumb, you're going to be able to see that. And that's not going to mean anything.
I'm going to say that was random and dumb.
Yeah. Like, hey, Fern, when you write on the board, like the writing just slants a little bit to it is.
Which is accurate, by the way.
Right, but it's like, is the feedback you're giving to that person going to make them better?
Right.
Or are you just giving them something to give it to them?
Yeah. I look at it through the lens of the feedback is not actually for the trainer. It's actually for the recipient.
For the recipient of the service that you're providing.
Whether it's the athlete or the other coaches in there. And I'm like, so it's like an easy throughput to try to offset, like, this is not, in order to, because a lot of people avoid feedback because it feels combative.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if we can not make this a me-you thing, and this is about them, I find that it makes it easier. We're like, hey, okay, cool. So here's what we're trying to achieve for the participants. Here was the outcome. Here's what we need to try to do to improve that. That's not about you anymore. It's not like, hey, you blew it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's not like you blew it.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's about them. Yeah. It's not about how you feel or how I feel.
It takes emotion out of it. And I love that. Because generally I also think that the people that struggle to receive feedback, it comes from a place of insecurity, you know? And just lack of confidence, or they feel like they've got to prove something, and now you're calling them out on it. And so then they feel like they have to defend how they were doing it.
Right.
And that whole defensive thing, again, if you just strip everything away, it's usually because they lack confidence in whatever you're talking to them about. And I like the idea of just taking all that off the table and being like, we're talking about how can we make this product better.
Right. And that goes to outcomes. Like, what's the outcome over here? And then getting them there, obviously. And then what you brought up earlier, which is like provide solutions. Then there's two other things that there's a book that I read, and for the life of me, I can't remember it. Oh, Uncomfortable Conversations. One of the things he has in there, I don't remember exactly how he formatted it, but the way I remember it was, a lot of it is like relationship based, which is literally what all of this is anyway. But it was like, try to avoid using the word you. And I was like, how do you do that? And I'm like, simply by just asking that question, like, puts you in a whole different headspace with regard to like tone, phrases, like just your general approach to, all of a sudden it's like, how would I give Kristin feedback without using the word? And it's not like you can never use it, right?
Does it take you more to like making I statements, or is
we, them, and because you can be perceived as like conflict now. You is automatically kind of associated with you and me, or you versus me.
And it puts people on a defense.
Correct. Which is like, it's accusatory. Is that a word? It's like, it's like an accusation, like, hey, you messed that up.
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, like, we got to start the whiteboard briefs on time for this reason, which insinuates that you were late.
Right.
Without saying you're late. Yeah. So you can get there. And some people, and at first I was a little resistant to the idea, because I'm like, no, they need to know. Like, screw them, you know? And then I had to wise up, because I was like, oh, well, it became combative, at which point I'm like, well, this is all pointless now.
Yeah.
Like, they're not actually receiving the feedback anymore. So, again, that was a me thing. That was me being like overly aggressive with it and trying to be like, I'm telling you what to do, which is exactly the way it was perceived, versus like, we should do a better job for the people that we're working with. And that means we have to be on time.
It's so interesting, isn't it? It's like,
well, it seems simple. And that's why I think, like, I love this conversation in general. Like, it's really nuanced.
It really is.
Like, another one that like I learned from Chuck was, and I do most of my breakouts in level 2s, is I just ask them to do a self-evaluation.
Okay.
So like, they finish the breakout, I'm like, how did it go? And like, if you had to run it back right now, what would you change, if anything at all? And that's a tactic for me to figure out, where are they and where am I, to figure out what's the gap.
So good.
Because the gap might be really large, at which point I'm going to taper or temper the feedback, because I'm like, oh, I can't come in hot, because they think they crushed it, and that was hot garbage that we just watched.
Or what happens so often, we can be our own worst critics.
You're like, it was terrible.
People are like, oh my gosh, I just horrible. Like, wait, actually, I thought you did a pretty darn good job. Yeah. So it can go either way with that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's such a good strategy for sure.
That's Chuck.
Yeah.
It's just like, but I was
he
just
knows
like,
a few things.
He's He's fairly good at it. But that was always one that I took because it's like it's kind of an icebreaker, and it kind of gets them the opportunity to like lead a little bit. And so that's what, if I give feedback to coaches on the floor, I'm like, what did you like it?
Yeah.
Did you like your class? And if not, why? And then it makes it easy on me too.
Yeah.
Or if they're just like, I didn't like this, I'm like, I agree. Here's a couple things where you could kind of like tweak that up or save some time or think about moving those over there. And they're like, oh, cool. But that was their idea.
Yeah.
Not mine anymore. And I just get to help provide like the improvement instead of being like, you really blew the logistic plan here. Like, this is a shit show.
And it allows you too to see what their level of self-awareness is, you know?
That's the key.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about with, we ended it the other day with the lesson plans. Like, that was something that really, James Hobart told me this years ago. I think it was in a level 2 setting, was just like, hey, every coach will run over on timeline. He's like, I don't care if you run over on timeline. I care if you know why you run over on timeline.
So good. Yeah.
And it's like such a simple statement, but it speaks to that, what you just said, which is like the self-awareness piece, which is like, that's another level of professionalism that you're trying to develop. It's just like, you ran over. So what?
Right.
Everybody runs over. It's like, it's not about running over. Why? Why did we run over? How can we fix that to move that? Because it puts them in a different state of mind with regard to like, you know, being actively engaged with the thing they're doing instead of just like mindlessly drumming around doing nothing.
Right.
It's just like, do you used to give feedback here? Or do you do coach evals?
Sometimes, yeah. We're going to start something coming up pretty soon, I think. A little bit more of a structured, I think at any point I could come in and give
But you're not like actively
but I'm not
giving.
actively doing it, no.
Have you gone through bouts of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit. Not too crazy, though. I would
What
like
are some
to
of
do
the
it more.
What are some of the common themes that you've seen?
Here or in general,
just here.
classes
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I've watched here?
Yeah.
I think that commonly everyone does a really good job with the structure of the class, the lesson plan, timeline allotment. I think honestly, and this isn't different from most places, it's the seeing and correcting that I want to just see more of. But I think that's pretty normal.
Common.
Yeah, the teaching's there because there's an expectation. There's a structured expectation, right? Like we provide the warm up, or not we, the programming that we do. I don't do it, but we've got a warm up of the day, and then we have tiers that we use here, which is essentially like
meaning like the different versions of the workout.
Yeah, RX, intermediate, beginner, suggestions,
right?
It helps lead people a little bit, and then of course you scale from there. So that has been laid out for you, and so the nature of the way the classes are structured here, it's probably very similar to how you guys do it at Rife. It's like whiteboard brief, general warm-up, specific warm-up, workout, cool down, right? And then if you have to add, if we have 2 parts, like today we had 2 parts. There's like a shoulder press, push press, part A, but then part B had dumbbell shoulder. So it's like we're already warmed up. We're just going to do a little 8-minuter at the end. And I forget what the question was. Where was I going with this? Oh, yes. Generally speaking, so like everybody does a pretty good job with the structure of the class.
Not shocking. It's worth noting, like, what's the most? 3 people or 4 people here? 4 seminar staff. 3? You, Courtney, Sarah.
3.
Yeah. Okay.
At
So
one time.
Yeah, all at the same time. So
all
like,
at the same time.
So like
so
high
kind
caliber
of
coaches. So everybody else kind of
started.
like watches that and they're like, I'll probably just do that. That's
Right.
probably, like,
And
the safe bet.
if you kind of backtrack everything, right, it's like, well, Andy and Ryan, who are the owners, they learned from Sarah, and Sarah learned from, in California, Pat Sherwood and Joe Alexander's and, Chuck and all those guys. And so it kind of trickles down, right?
Yeah.
So there's an advantage there where if like you learn from the
I
people
feel,
that were the OGs,
I feel like we're kind
right?
of the same way. Like we have a similar, like, not lineage, but like a similar advantage.
I like lineage. I like that lineage.
I do like lineage, but there is a lineage. But I do think we have the same kind of advantage where like that has just like bled down.
Yeah, and so it's like I don't know any other way than to coach a class that way.
Right.
And it just happens to align with the best way to do it. No, it just happens to align with like an effective way that we recommend coaching a class. So I've never not coached a class that way.
Turns out it works.
Yeah.
I asked Denise this same question, and I'm curious what your thoughts on her. Because it happens way less now, but it still does happen. We get questions about like females giving feedback to males.
Oh yeah, that's hard.
Why?
It's a hard. It's not hard for me.
Right.
It's a hard answer to give someone because I just think that there's a lot that comes into play, right? What are the personalities? What are the and actually,
are they both
I remember
A-type as well.
Right. And like, what's your relationship? Like,
Right.
do you guys know each other? Or there's so many things. But I mean, is the question basically like, how do you handle?
I'm actually like increasingly thinking that it's not a thing, and we've just made it a thing. Meaning, like, I'm not saying it's not a thing.
Yeah.
I'm saying that like the scenario would still exist if you just replaced the female with another male, where you just added, where the context was exactly the same, where there was like no relationship. One was junior, one was senior. There might have been some conflict there or some passive aggressiveness there. And I'm like, well, either way, it's going to be the same.
Yeah, and perhaps you could argue that we're quick to be like, oh, well, he's not listening because she's a female.
Right.
Where it's like, maybe he's just not listening because he doesn't want to take feedback.
Correct.
However, I will say I've been in multiple situations over the years where I have given feedback to someone, whether it's in a class, coaching, like, hey, open your hips or whatever the case may be. Or feedback to beyond that.
Right.
And I got met with a wall, and then a male coworker would come up and give almost the exact same feedback, and then they'd be like, "Oh, thanks, man, that's really helpful." And it's like, nothing
Hold
will
this kettlebell.
heat me up faster.
I just said that, Josh.
Oh my gosh.
Literally those same words.
One of the analogies I've heard about like my personality type, I'm an Enneagram 9, but there's, just other different personality types. It's like, hey, it takes a lot to blow my fuse, like to.
Oh, I've seen it.
And the reason is the fuse is just much longer. But so it just takes a lot longer. It takes more. But once you get there, the dynamite is still the same power as everyone else's.
Still dynamite.
And nothing will get that little fuse going faster than when something like that happens. Yeah.
Or if somebody's not listening to what you're saying, you're like, no, I just said that.
Yes, yeah.
I've seen Kristin do that before. No, I literally just said that.
Oh
I was
my
like,
gosh.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I've told this story
she's
to a couple people, but we had a guy come in, not to characterize or,
We can.
But, okay.
It's fun.
Just like a younger military guy,
Yeah, of course.
not used to being coached probably. And then this is where I'm like,
Bravado.
maybe the female, I don't know. But yeah, like, hey, I'm Kristin. I'm your coach today. General warm up. Hey, dude, try widen up your stance a little bit on your squat, right? He's not getting into depth, losing his neutral spine. So pretty basic, straightforward fix. He's squatting hip width apart. Hey, widen up your stance a little bit. No, this is just how I squat. This is where I squat.
You mean like shit?
He's like, well, just try to widen him up just a little bit so we can. And then under his breath, he's like, okay, I've only had 27 years of learning where my stance is. And it's just like, remember a few minutes ago you were talking about how that you used to when it was too much, you used to just like abandon ship.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I did. I was
really?
and I'm out. I know that wasn't the right thing to do, but I was just like, nope. Fine, you're not going to get any of my coaching, and I'm going to coach everyone else in the class.
Turns out I'm
not
pretty
the right
good at
thing
this.
to do, but still, it's like, so even still now where I know logically at that moment, I know I should not abandon ship and I should like continue to just grease the wheel. But every once in a while you're just like, no, if he doesn't, he's moving safely, he's fine. And if he doesn't want to take what I have to say, and I can't help but think it's because I'm a female and he doesn't know me. We have no rapport. He doesn't know like
your level of expertise, and you do this for a living.
That's part of the culture you create at your gym, right? Like you shouldn't have to know my coaching resume to take coaching cues from me, and that that's just the way that it is. But
that's probably like a kind of a good place to kind of wrap up, because if that's the way to fix that, right? The way to kind of attack that problem, at least I see, is that you have to give feedback to all the coaches so that they all continue to move to raise the bar for expectation. And that way, because that seeps down into the classes.
Yes.
And then that one person that comes in is kind of forced to assimilate because like, well, everybody does this. Like you're not special. guy or gal. Like, I get it, but that's not how we do shit here, you know? And I think that starts with the leadership, and that starts with like having the hard conversations and continuing to have the hard conversation. Like you and I were just talking before this. I was like, I gotta have like a couple, and that's fine. But like, that's my job. And if I want everybody to get better, if I want the members to get the experience that I want them to get, if I want the staff to continue to uphold the standard, it sucks, but that's what I signed up for.
And empowerment comes from the top. That's, I think, really powerful for the coaches to know that the owner has their back, right?
Right.
Like the owner maybe is giving hard feedback to the coaches, but in turn, what that does is just create a unified front so that we're all on the same page. And then you can make that stand and be like, you know, that person's not listening to me. Maybe it's because I'm a female. Maybe it's not. But regardless, and then you can peel it apart even more. Now I'm going to rely on my own knowledge.
Right.
Regardless of if this person wants to listen to me or not, I am confident in what I'm telling them. I'm confident in the feedback that I'm giving them. And if they choose not to listen, then that's kind of on them. But I know I'm empowered from the top to stand here and give that to them, because this is the way that we roll here.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and I think that's, and obviously you guys have a long history of that here. You guys run a really solid gym here, and that's cool. And I think it's easier for other coaches to kind of gain that confidence when they step in. They're like, oh, I do have that ability to do that. And again, like you said, that comes from the top. And I think that's where a lot of us as business owners, like, we fall short, because we're just like running the rat race, and then we forget about the thing. And then suddenly we have a problem, and like cancellations start coming through. And this is interesting. When that starts happening, almost always my immediate feedback is like, you need to redivert all of your energy back into the classes. Like, that's actually your problem, because there's either a cultural problem that's happening in there, the people are getting lazy or lackadaisical about delivering the service. And the issue with that is a slow burning fuse.
Yeah. You're not going to see it.
You're not going to see it one day.
Yeah.
It's just going to slowly creep up on her.
Yeah.
And then one weird thing is going to happen where Jenny has a weird interaction with Bob, and then like everybody's out. They're just like, yeah, this sucks. We don't like it anymore.
And you're fooling yourself if you think everyone's out because of the interaction between Jenny and Bob.
No, it was the 400 microfractures prior to that for like 90 days.
Yeah.
And that's why I like really, I'm like, go, like, you have to give the feedback. You have to continue to make sure that this remains as good as humanly possible, because the reality is, you and I know this, if that's as good as you can possibly make it, you can mess up a lot of other stuff and get away with it.
Yeah.
It's not okay. But as long as as long as the classes are like as good as you could possibly make them, you can buffer a lot of other mistakes. And I think people forget that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, dude, like, go make the main thing. And that involves you getting back in there, giving the coaches feedback, and having a bunch of hard conversations. And every time, without a doubt, I find that there's a little bit of friction. Everybody gets on board, and the outcome is super positive, because everybody's just like, oh, it's actually fun to be good at something.
Right. But you're not ever going to be really good at something unless you're uncomfortable at times, right? Like, you have to let yourself be bad. You have to let yourself make mistakes. But if you have the people there in your corner ready to give you that feedback and offer you those actionable solutions and like support you in that process, it's only going to get you better.
You're hearing it from the best. Okay, Bo? Thank you.
Fern, thank you.
Awesome. Here's to the next 300 seminars.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. 10 more years on the road.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. We appreciate you listening and choosing to have us help you in your passion for coaching and affiliate ownership. You can find more episodes just like this on all podcast platforms. If you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to us on any social media platforms, or you can visit www.besthouroftheirday.com to book a call. If you found this episode helpful for you, please share it so that we can help other coaches and affiliate owners to help build a bigger and stronger CrossFit community. Thanks for listening.